reboot kind of, yeah.
It's usually what it takes, you know.
I've done it like 2 or 3 times, so I was a little bit of a sweat session. Considering I was already 3 days behind the payroll.
All right, Jeff says we're good whenever.
Okay, at 7 o'clock, I'll call the meeting to order. If you could stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jackie, you have the roll?
I do.
Okay, looks like we have a quorum. Item C, adoption of the agenda. The only change I have is the additional list of bills that Jackie sent out this afternoon. Are there any other modifications? If not, entertain a motion to approve that when you're ready. So moved.
Second.
A motion and second to adopt the agenda with the additional list of bills. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item D, public input on non-agenda items. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on non-agenda items? Anyone who would like to reserve time to speak on agenda items? Okay. None noted. Item E, approval of minutes of past meetings. Looks like we have about 2 pages from the February 14th board meeting. There's no comments on those. I'll entertain a motion to approve when we're ready.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of past meeting.
I'll second.
A motion and second to approve the minutes of the past meetings. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Item F, approval of financial items. The financial reports, summary list of bills plus the additional list, and Jackie's report.
On the first page, so page 5 is your general fund summary. As you can see, our expenditures, or revenue first, is up $486,000 from last year to current year. It has a lot to do with our ESSER dollars again, and a few other factors, but mostly that. Our expenditures are up about $154,000, and that's pretty typical in kind of this time frame of the year. We'll judge a little bit more strictly as we get closer to the end of the year. It's a lot of ebbs and flows, so I'm not too worried about expenditures. That's kind of in line with where I predicted we would be. And cash is up fairly significantly, as you can see, $1.1 million. We have a $2.9 million balance in a general fund. And as we talk about our budget and our cash reserve levy coming up, we'll address some of that. But mostly it's due to just the fact that we have ESSER dollars coming in, offsetting current expenditures, so our expenditures are lower, meaning our cash is higher. So that's kind of the ultimate easy scenario or easy explanation for that. So, on the second page, special revenue fund. Each of our special revenues is listed there: management, PEPAL, Pearl, SAVE, and debt service. Management fund, what's going to come out of there the rest of the year is a little bit of nothing, actually. It just really maintains its balance, and once a year between July and September, it's kind of our influx of expenditures out of management. Otherwise, unless we have a work comp claim or unless we have an unemployment claim, our management fund just kind of continues to build to prepare for paying our property and casualty and liability insurance in the fall, and then our early retirement payouts in the summer. Physical plant and equipment levy, $145,000 there. Playground, Pearl, $76,000, and SAVE at $840,000. All three of those You'll want to kind of keep note of that as we get into the conversations with FEH and some future plans and priorities as we go forward. And the next page, on page 7, is activity and proprietary funds. So activity, hot lunch, student construction, FFA farm, and our split fund. Not a lot of specifics to report there unless someone has a specific question. Our split fund, as you can see, has a pretty significant balance, and Mr. Jorth and I met with Gallagher this morning to talk about some options as far as maybe changing or improving or just some different offering for our health insurance to try and utilize some of these funds to the best of our ability for the staff and to prepare for possibly what might be coming down the healthcare and insurance changes and increases in costs and that kind of thing. Otherwise, that's what I have to report as far as the financial reports. Summary list of bills is in front of you, including the additional that I sent out earlier, and then I did put a copy in front of each of you as well. Are there any specific questions in there? I will prepare you that next month your bills will include some state travels, so.
Did we get quite a few donations?
We did get quite a few
To offset.
donations. I think Mr. Jorth is maybe gonna talk about that a little bit, if not tonight, or at least in the coming weeks as we kind of finalize those. Very happy for all the people that contribute to our travels. It absolutely helps offset some of those expenditures, so.
Okay. Thanks, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Any questions, discussion on those items?
As you review your additional list of bills, only one other report I have is that we just met with the budget/finance committee and kind of discussed our property tax, our budget for the next year, and you'll see that in our April agenda. You'll see a publication here in the next couple weeks in the paper. That'll be our property tax rate as far as what we're gonna ask our taxpayers to contribute to our district. And we're gonna show a little bit of a decrease in our property tax rate, so that's always good news for our taxpayers. And I'll send out more information for that in the coming weeks.
There's no additional questions or comment, I'll entertain a motion to approve those financial items. When you're ready.
So moved.
Motion and second to approve the list of financial items, including the additional list of bills. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Item G, administrative reports, discussion items. 1, recognition and congratulations to student, staff, and community. Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, so I put a document on your table, and then there's additional copies if anybody wants to grab those as well. But first wanted to recognize, all the students for all their achievements here over the course of the last month. We've had a lot. Top of that page, you can see the high school vocal jazz group has qualified for their state championship. So I believe there's 18 students in that group, 19 actually, I apologize. So they'll be traveling to Des Moines in 2 weeks to compete. So we wish them the best of luck. They also won their division at the Spirit Lake competition. So they've been busy this winter, and we've got the vocal, we got the swing shows for middle school and in the high school. So get those on your calendar. You can see them in action here over the course of the next couple weeks. State wrestling, we congratulated those state qualifiers last month in February, and all three, Levi, Reagan, and Lyle, competed down in Des Moines. Unfortunately, they didn't make the podium, but represented us well. The update that I did have on there was the academic all conference. Cale Schulte was recognized as the senior on the team that for the wrestlers was recognized as academic all conference from wrestling. And then our girls and boys teams obviously played the last couple weeks here in Des Moines, both finished with a 24-3 record, and you can see all the different individual accolades. whether it's the academic all-conference or first, second, or third team or honorable mention recognitions, all the way through the state recognitions for the girls. The boys, they're, I think, being released after midnight tonight for their all-state recognition stuff. So I'll have that back in the recognitions for next month. On the back, I've got some community recognition. If you remember last month, we had fourth grade kindness squad teachers in here, kind of telling you guys about their program. So over the course of the last month, they worked with Mrs. Christensen and Foods 2 students, as well as Frontier Bank volunteers, to make cookies and then deliver them to kind of our public safety folks. So the sheriff's department, the ambulance crew, and then the fire department. So Frontier helped to kind of defray the costs of making the cookies and then send some folks down here to help make them with the kids. So that was pretty fun. Tonight, we've got Moms in Prayer that's providing dinner for staff during parent-teacher conferences, so I want to thank them. I think the menu was Union Jacks tonight and then sandwiches on Thursday. So appreciate that. And then Amy, as you asked, these are the individuals that we've received monetary donations or they paid for a meal while they were in Des Moines or on their way to and from. So we're gonna recognize them in the newspaper as well over the course of the next week. And then Jackie's been sending thank yous on behalf of the board as we've got those donations. So really appreciate families and the businesses that have helped defray the costs. You know, I had said in one of my messages to you, we estimated the cost to be about $32,000 if we made it all the way to the state championship. We do get a little reimbursement from the Athletic Association and the Girls Union, but it definitely doesn't cover the costs of the lodging and the travel and the food. So this definitely helps. The fact that we've had really great crowds through the entire winter has really helped as well. If you remember last year with our limited attendance, we really rebounded, and it's a testament to the kids and their performance. So the activities account is in a good spot to cover the costs for that, but these donations definitely help.
It's been a fun and busy month.
No doubt about it.
Any additional communications?
Yes, so also at your table, you should have like two flyers, one from the FFA. It's on a white piece of paper. Their annual banquet is scheduled for the 9th of April. They've invited everybody here. If you would kind of RSVP to Mr. Rockhill, either using that or you can email him directly or call and just let Leah know. You can help with that. And then prom as well. Everybody's invited for the meal at the First Reformed Church. And I'm sure Mrs. Christensen would love if anybody would want to chaperone, stay for the dance, and help out with that. So those are two things there. And then just in the mail the other day, we got from Avera, I'm just going to pass this around. This is more probably just a general communication, but Avera is expanding their behavioral health, and it speaks specifically to adolescents and youth, social, emotional, behavioral health. So kind of pass that around. Not necessarily locally here, but in Sioux Falls, they're increasing the number of beds and the number of, they're trying to hire more staff to meet the need. So I know we've talked about that a few different times, and it's nice to see that they're taking that feedback from everybody here and across their system and investing in that. So I wanted to make sure that everybody got that too.
Okay, with that. Items 3 and 4 don't have any presentations tonight due to parent-teacher conferences, so no students and staff and principals. So I will throw it back to you.
You bet, we'll just keep rolling, right?
Yep.
Okay, in the packet I had kind of a memo from the Department of Ed in regards to governor's teacher retention payments for teachers. Now, the devil's in the details with the teacher retention payments. The key phrase that came out of this is $1,000 to each full-time, in-person classroom teacher. So for us, we've got 67 teachers, certified teachers with a teaching license. Unfortunately, 10 of our staff members don't qualify underneath that full-time, in-person category or definition, and that would be our school counselors, that would be our instructional coaches, and then we've got 3 part-time staff members that are less than full-time, so they're here 3 days a week or work a half day every day. And again, working with the personnel committee, we wanted to make sure that those folks also receive that retention payment. When we take those 10 folks, based upon their part-time status, that cost comes at about $8,700. So we've authorized payment for that because it's under that $10,000 threshold. If we had more than 10 staff members or their FTE was greater than 10, we would have had an action item in here. But in order to make sure everybody was paid here in March, we didn't have to have a separate meeting to make sure they got paid. One of the caveats is that everybody had to be paid here in March. And so we wanted to make sure we could get that taken care of ahead of time. So the other thing that I think the board needs to consider is the 59 other staff members that are not certified as teachers. So that could be our 27 paras, our 8 food service, 7 custodians, 3 bus drivers, 3 secretaries, and then 11 leadership team members. I think the board at some point, maybe after negotiations are over, needs to consider what we might want to do for those folks, whether it's $1,000 or it's $500 or something different than that, to kind of recognize those staff members for all the work they've done and try to retain them like where the governor's kind of done for teachers. So again, the devil's in the details. The district employs about 126 staff members. And in reality, only 57 of those 127, we've got funding to provide these retention payments. So
Is that something we use the ESSER funds?
we can use ESSER dollars, yep. We would have to amend that plan. And there's some stipulations. Got that from the department. And so as I talk to my cohorts, across the conference and across Northwest Iowa, it's kind of split. Some school districts have already spent all their ESSER dollars or already have kind of definitive plans for that. We have not necessarily spent all those dollars down. We have some flexibility, and that's where I think we need to consider that going forward. So that's kind of the retention payment update. In the packet, I had a copy of the approved calendar for this year, and I gave you a couple additional calendar options with the updates based upon our late starts because of weather or no school for similar circumstances, or any of our dismissals here in the last 2 weeks because of state basketball. So when I add up all the time students have been out of school, it really comes to a little over 48 hours. So if we were to follow strictly what was approved a year ago for our calendar, our last day for students would be Thursday, June 2nd. Definitely falls in line with what we've been, communicating with our community. And the other option which I gave you would be to consider students' last day the Friday before Memorial Day, so the 27th. When I look at the amount of time, that's about 28 hours, a little over 28 hours, 3 days plus our early dismissal and late start stuff. The contributing factor that I think the board needs to consider is the fact that our high school band and choir, their Florida trip leaves that Sunday before Memorial Day. And there's 84 kids that are involved in that in the high school, really 74 9 through 11th graders, because our seniors are done a couple weeks before everybody else. So before we even come back after Memorial Day, at least in the high school, we're gonna have 40% of the students roughly that are gonna be absent. So, you know, I'm looking for maybe some feedback from the board. I don't think we have to take action on this. It's just something that we need to communicate with folks about when we want our last day to be. One thing that I would want to make sure we maintained is those days for our staff. You know, our staff came back after Memorial Day, it would be teacher professional development, opportunity for principals to continue their work that they've started during the school year. Some stuff we could do and partner with the ADA for additional training for those 3 days for staff.
So that's essentially to get them to their contract days, right?
Yep, so students, we've always built our calendar around 180 days, but what we tell the state is we're gonna meet the minimum hours. We're always over the minimum number of hours. So it's really the number of days doesn't matter. It's really the instructional time. And we're almost 80 hours above and beyond what the minimum is.
We hit that minimum hour, was it like May, middle of May, right in there?
Yep. Yep, so if we went 1,080 hours, we could be done as soon as May 18th. Even with all the snow days and the late starts, that's where we would kind of pass that minimum threshold. Even going to the 27th, like I said, we're still gonna be way beyond, you know, it's a 11:30. We're still at 50 hours beyond the minimum, you know, a little more than a week by the time we kind of consider all of that.
So in the high school, realistically, all of the testing, final testing, is going to probably have to be done before Memorial Day, by the 27th, given that you're gonna have roughly half of the high school gone.
Yep.
So then, to me, that asks a question, so then what happens those 3 or 4 days, or however many days after Memorial Day? What's gonna happen in those classrooms, those 2 or 3 days? I don't know.
Yeah. It's gonna be more of an enrichment type of activity for those last 3 days for those 9th through 11th grade students. Than it is going to be kind of our core instruction testing that we would typically have the last 3 days.
Define enrichment activities.
So it's gonna be learning opportunities for kids that aren't necessarily gonna be graded and put in the grade book. We're not gonna send 3 days of work with our band kids, or make them do 3 days of work before they leave, so that we can get it in the grade book and factor it into their second semester grade.
Well, as I kind of look at the days off too, we had one in the second quarter, and I'm not looking at the late starts, but there's one day in the second quarter, there's one day in the third quarter, and then there's 4 days in the third quarter. And so, and we're gonna make up 3 of those if we would stop the
On the-
27th.
on
So
that
then there's
Friday.
kind of like, as I kind of rationalize how that's playing out, I guess. It's not like we are missing 3 more days or whatever in the third quarter or fourth quarter, as long as there's no other crazy weather that happens.
Are there any midterm classes that need more days at all?
And I think at this point, our midterm, our high school teachers can adjust to those 3 days.
Like service learning and stuff, that's not like affected, I'm assuming, I mean, anything like that where they have to
It would be your roll through classes.
Yeah, it'd be the algebra, the math classes and
Yep.
the
Like classes the
science
younger-
classes that continue, yep, that are year long.
That 39% too is call it like an average, you're gonna have different classes, right, that are gonna have a
Yep.
whole lot less than that, and then you have other classes that
Yeah, as you
may
can
be
see,
somewhat
the
intact.
27 juniors and 29 freshmen, make up more than 2/3 of that 74.
Well, and already there's no seniors, so I mean, that takes,
Right.
you're already down on fourth of the school.
So my recommendation would be, let's be done on Friday. Yes, our middle school and our elementary kids aren't as impacted. But as I think back to 2 years ago when we had parents in and we were talking about the calendar in general, the feedback that we got at that time was, let's try to be done before Memorial Day if we possibly can. And if we have to go beyond Memorial Day, no more than that first week after Memorial Day. And it's just I think it's a clean break if you're done on that Friday and it's a long weekend. Getting some of those younger kids tuned back in for 3 short days.
And I feel like they're kind of in the same boat in the younger classrooms, like the last 3 days, if you go back, what are they, probably doing the last 3 days, that's worth.
How much additional educational value is there going to be in those 3
Right.
days?
Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, I feel like they're kind of winding down the year and they do more fun activities and things like that.
I think if teachers are comfortable where they're at and don't necessarily missing information to get to their students, then it seems like we should be able to work with that. And then, if teachers come back and have.
They have
professional
3 days
development.
of professional learning and some,
So would that be a time, we talked a lot about the mental health and emotional health and stuff of our students.
Yep.
I mean, could that maybe be a time where we really are addressing that with our teachers and,
Yep.
Maybe how they can handle things in the classroom and we're not having to have kids leave the classroom and kind of working, that seems like it's kind of been a big focus and concern lately that to have
exactly.
some of that extra time maybe can be really more beneficial with that than with the kids in the classroom.
Yep. And, most schools do have a couple days at the end of their calendar for that professional learning. So that's where I say it's really gonna be dependent upon, can I get somebody from the AEA or other partners that aren't already booked for those days? So,
Yeah.
otherwise, we'll be doing it ourselves and we'll be leading that, which is fine. It's just nice if we're gonna dig into the mental health to have a partner.
We contract with Creative Living Center, is that right?
Yep.
Or, would that be a resource that maybe?
Or even Avera or Sanford in their
Yeah, yep.
staff as well. Yep.
Carrie alluded to it, but I didn't want to say it. It is gonna be 60 degrees on Wednesday, so hopefully there's no more blizzards coming through or anything like that. Okay, I'll do that. Good.
You just jinxed it.
Well, she started. She never be won't have to say it. It's gonna be 60, we're good, right? But I don't even know if that would have an impact on our thinking if it's just 1 day, so.
Yeah. Why we at least have all those hours that we can discuss.
I'm fine if we have like a general nodding of the head tonight. I
Is
do-
there any benefit, before we go on, is there any need for it with May term starting, when it starts to, and we're adding on a few days, do classroom teachers?
Yeah, I would really
I'm-
leave that up to Jason in his conversation
Yeah.
with his staff if they felt like they needed to get
A couple more
a
days?
couple more days, when he would,
Yeah,
what they
I
would
don't-
recommend to start.
Mhm. Yeah, I would be, open to whatever they think too,
Yep.
or whatever, just.
Allow them
that
to
a lot of
adjust
this,
based upon their.
elementary they don't have to worry, and middle school don't have to worry about some of these like the high school.
So that's kind of the consensus that I'm getting is,
I'd like to at least understand what are we going to do in those 3 days then with the other staff members? A little bit of structure around that professional
Yep.
learning. I'd like to understand what that looks
you
like.
bet. Definitely by our May
Yeah.
meeting, we'll have that principals or I can get you a report on what those 3 days will look like.
It is a significant calendar adjustment, so I would like to bring it back next month just in case for formal approval. But is everybody,
Yep.
we kind of okay with waiting those days?
Okay. Sounds good.
All right.
Third item then I have is our work session. It's on the back of that memo. We tried a couple different options to get Amy to in-person training, and just based upon scheduling conflicts, we just weren't able to make it happen. So reached out to ISB for them just to come and do something with us and our board specifically. And so as I talked to their board development director, these are, the first two are really the primary focus of what that new board member orientation is all about. Board roles and responsibilities, open meetings, transparency laws, and policy basics. But then, since 4 out of the 5 of us are returning, I thought we just finished our annual kind of student achievement work session. I thought it might be good for us to kind of go a little bit further than that one annual meeting where you guys are getting a snapshot and what maybe the ongoing conversations we could be having, whether it's reports from staff or principals or myself, to kind of make sure that you guys understand how we're monitoring that student achievement on an ongoing basis. So these were kind of her recommendations for if we wanted to dig into that a little bit more. That portion would be, those first 2 things would be anywhere from an hour to an hour and 15 minutes of the meeting. And then the student achievement would be, 45 minutes to an hour. If you didn't want to tackle the student achievement, these were kind of the 5 other topics that the ISB could kind of customize for us. Defining the well-educated student, evaluating the superintendent, creating a culture of excellence and innovation, district finance consultation, or developing your board advocacy action plan. So kind of working with, this time of year, advocating at the legislative level. I thought the student achievement one made the most sense to me, but doesn't necessarily mean that's what we have to do.
I kind of like the creating a culture of excellence and innovation a little bit too.
I had actually started that one as well. Same.
Might be interested in that one too.
I had it highlighted as well.
Okay.
Who am I to disagree?
Okay, so I'll get back on the phone with Luann down at ISB and kind of head down that direction and get some more details. I think a lot of these things kind of overlap, but that's a good, happy to do that. The only last question I have then is, she's willing to come anytime on the 7th, kind of after business hours. I just wanted to know what time worked best for you guys. Do we want to start at 5:30 and go to 7:30? Do we want to start at 7 and go to 9? Do we want to start somewhere between 5:30 and 7? She's kind of doing a Northwest Iowa swing, so the 7th is reserved for us.
Either one works for me.
Thursday. It's a Thursday.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. So mock trial is like the 22nd of
Yes.
next week.
Yep.
The state mock trial, I want to say, is in that week.
That I
Obviously,
don't.
you have to make it Tuesday, but anyway, maybe I was talking about that.
Right, and then usually the competition is either Tuesday, Wednesday, and then if they make it, it's then Thursday, Friday. If they continue on,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
It's sometime in that week, it's.
That'd be high school, right?
Yeah.
You okay with 5:30?
5:30.
Everybody else okay with that?
There's nothing else on the right, it's just boys track that day.
That is it.
There's nothing else, so yeah, I'm good with 5:30.
Okay, all right, on to item 6, board committees, buildings and grounds.
Dave, sorry, March 31st, 3 second.
I just got-
Okay, sorry.
FEH design, facilities assessment study. Brent, you want to introduce them?
Yeah, so I'd like to welcome Matt Basie and Scott Anderson from FEH. They've worked with Terry and Scott, Steve Bresky, and Jackie and I over the course of the last few months on the facilities assessment. You know, in the packet, I just really gave you the kind of executive summary. But it's, the whole study is a lot more detailed, and you've got a physical copy here. I think we talked about 11, 12 different separate projects. But I'm gonna turn over to them. Thank you. So, Matt, Scott, it's all yours.
Ready for us. Thank you for having us tonight. I am Matt Basie with FEH Design, one of the principals of the firm in our Sioux City office. Scott Anderson is with me tonight, one of our architects. We really had the privilege to work with your group through this study. Just a couple things about how the study went. It was a very enjoyable process for us with your administrators and board members. We had some really good discussion. You have quite a few priorities quite a few diverse priorities for facilities. That's always fun for us. You know, it's a little bit of variety and that kind of thing. So we did put together this study. We started this study.
Matt, do you want me to put the disc in?
Oh, do you have the one we emailed to you?
Yeah.
You could use that one too
okay.
if it's easier for you, Brent.
You bet.
We started the study in November by coming and doing a walkthrough tour of the facility. After we made our agreement, went around the district's facilities with Brent and Steve and looked at, you know, everything that you had. Really fine facilities, you know, very good condition. We were very impressed. Took some notes, took some pictures, you know, kind of got the lay of the land and to understand everything that you have. November and December, we did that survey. And then, starting in December through March here, we actually went through the process. What you have is the result of the process, and we don't have a lot of time to get into the weeds with it tonight, but we want to give you a good summary of it. I would just ask that anybody that was on the committee, stop me anytime. If you'd like to add anything, I'm happy to address it. I really want to make sure that your board gets the information that you feel is important to them. Everybody can look through the book. It isn't as dry as it looks, so you can, you know, take a look through and see what we did. I'm going to primarily concentrate on tab number 1 and tab number 13. Everybody wants us to read the first page and the last page, so that's what we're going to do tonight. 2 through 12 are really the guts of our work. That shows all the different projects that we looked at, some of the discussion that we had, recommendations that we made. We also made some cost evaluation of if we were to turn a project into that, what it might look like for you. I want to just make a couple of general comments because we all know kind of the state of the world right now as far as, you know, doing project work and costs and things like that. I would like to suggest that the information that's in this book as far as costing is concerned is really to help prioritize things more than be an actual number. This is not a bid, this is an estimate that we have worked on to the best of the ability that we could and with the information that we had. I told the committee, I think every time we met, how difficult it was to do that right now. It is just a very difficult time. So we really want to caution, you know, when you're looking at these, we do think they're good numbers. They should be conservative at this point. We try to aim a little high right now so that we're not undervaluing what that's worth. And we also know literally day to day things are changing right now. So it was difficult. But I still think it's valuable for helping you to prioritize and kind of get the whole picture of what the process was and what the projects were. So if we start with tab number 1, and Brent, this would be the statement of purpose that we're looking at. I put this together kind of as an executive summary just to give a few highlighted points about the book, how it's put together, the information that's in here. I'm just going to say a few words about the underlined heading items at this point. The process was fairly simple. The district had, I think it was 12 total projects on a list, unprioritized, just knew that we had issues that we wanted to look at. How might we go about those? What priority position might they take? How important are they compared to each other? How much it might cost? How long might it take to do that? When could we expect to see that being done with funding sources that you have? So when we start with the process, we really just sat down after we looked through everything and talked with the committee about what we saw, what we found. We compared that with our knowledge of other facilities, other people's projects, safety concerns, maintenance concerns, wants, needs, those kind of things. We tried to put that all in here so you could see it in a format that made sense as a comparison to each other. So that's a little bit about the process. We held a series of meetings. I think it ended up being 4 meetings at the end of the day with the group through that time period. The meeting minutes are in the back in the appendix if anyone's interested in looking at those. So the process was fairly simple. We just sat down and talked about all these issues that you had. On the next page, study results, that's in the book. The book is here and has the results of what we came up with. So the majority of the book is unprioritized. That means we just put them in no particular order to show you what the project was. When we get to tab 13, that is cost summary along with priority order that the group thought made sense as far as how we categorize those projects, and we'll go over those in just a minute when we get to that page. Development of cost opinions, I said, has been very trying and difficult to figure out where we land on a cost basis for any project. You know, when we do cost estimating, the further you get into design and the closer you get into having a project planned and put out to bid, that's the best number that you're ever going to have as far as an estimate is concerned, before you get an actual number from a contractor. This book contains some proposed solutions to problems, and they were very high-level design. Not a lot of, there was time put in, but not a lot of specifics. A lot of different design decisions would have to be made to implement those. So the cost opinions are based on very high-level design. Since that was the case, we've been generous with contingencies because we just don't have all the information about the design to do that. Also, we want to be conservative, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute on the cost opinions. We did look at them as we think a contractor would. So a lot of times you'll hear square foot costing versus actual takeoff and number costing like a contractor would do. There's a combination of that in here depending on the projects, and I'll go over that when we get to the costs as well. Next, available funding. The district gave us information on the funding that you had available, what comes in each year, what that funding is earmarked for, can be used for, what debt service you still have on previous projects. So that is listed under available funding, and I think you're all pretty aware of those numbers as you talked about earlier. So that was also a basis for us figuring out what order to put projects in, what funding is available at what time, and that kind of thing. So that's in that section. Economy of scale. This is a term that we use in the design and construction industry to describe what happens if you have a small project that's a one-off project, or you have a large project that may go on for some time. So take, for example, if you have 3 small projects, and they're all going to be done successive summers, that means you may have 3 different contractors, you may have 3 different designers involved, you have 3 different times they have to come to the site and mobilize, bring their trailers and equipment and all that kind of thing, and then do the project work and finish. If we can group some of those projects together, we would, in that case, eliminate 2 mobilizations, 2 bringing things to site, all of the associated upfront and closeout work that goes with that. So we talked about that a little bit. What projects could possibly go together? Were there synergies between those that you may be able to save money, economy of time and scale? That's what that's talking about. Recent market volatility, I'm pretty sure I don't have to explain this to most in the room. Very difficult finding professionals to do the work, materials to do the work, time frame to get materials to do the work, all very difficult sort of project issues that we have to deal with. We talked about that. We talked about how long it would take to design a project if it turned into one, how long it might take to build that project, if we could combine them, that kind of thing was a discussion that we had too. Time frame, when we get to that tab 13, we have also indicated each individual project that we looked at, if it was an individual project, how long do we think it might take to do that? So then you can start using that to prioritize, well, we have these smaller projects and we could put them together and get them done in one summer. Well, we have a large project, it's going to take at least 2 summers to finish, how would that look? So what I've tried to do with the summary page is give you priorities from the group, probable costs it might take, time frame that it might take in one sort of easy cheat sheet that you can kind of use to do your planning. So I hope that's helpful. And then prioritizing of projects, we'll go into that in a minute, but at the end of the day, we ended up with 3 categories of project. The first was sort of imminent need based on safety, security, maintenance, issues like that. The second category was also maintenance, but not as immediate as the first category. And category 3 was sort of long-range planning, projects that probably need a little more discussion and time to understand them and to figure out what you might want to do. Okay, so that is tab number 1. If you could go back to the table of contents for me, Brent, real quickly, we will just briefly tell you what the projects were that we looked at. So in the table of contents after the statement of purpose, again, in the table they're in no particular order. This is just the order that they happen to come off the computer that Brent gave me in the first place. We looked at a new middle school gymnasium. Could be freestanding, could be an addition somewhere, but the point is a gymnasium. And the general scope of that work was a gym with a lobby, some seating inside the gym, concessions, restrooms, and some code-required things. Also, potentially some parking, how it would impact the site that we put it on. That was the general scope of that particular project. The second one was a new maintenance building. Maintenance building that you have is over by the athletic or the activity center. It's in pretty tough shape, if you've seen it. So we wanted to look at that if we were to replace it. The group felt that there was 2 possibilities there, so we could possibly replace it at the location that it is now. That had its own inherent project difficulties or challenges that we looked at. Or we could do a freestanding maintenance building, be just south of the tennis court. There was some synergy there between the fact that the tennis court is now being used for the construction program to build on that flat pad because the tennis courts aren't used anymore. So there was an opportunity to maybe do some storage and staging and things out of the maintenance building for that program if we were to put it in that location. So we looked at a couple options there. Next was a new bus barn. The bus barn is also in pretty tough shape if you've seen it lately. So we studied the possibility of replacing the bus barn, and the conditions there were, I think, for 10 vehicles, 3 or 4 staff, maintenance, washing, some storage, that kind of thing in that new facility. Sports complex had several issues that we looked at. The primary one I would say is the connection between the concession stand area and the visitors area because there's no paved way to get across there. So that was kind of where we started. We looked at some repairs to the track itself, as it has some damage. It's got some edges with a pretty steep drop off, so we looked at that. We also looked at moving the ticket entrance on the visitor side so that it was closer to the accessible ramp on the north end of the visitor stands, and some paving and things that went along with that. So the sports complex probably had 4 or 5 different components, and we evaluated those. Parking lot repairs and replacement. High school main lot all the way over to the North Drive, along with the activity building. The paving is in rough shape. It's asphalt, needs some work. So we evaluated that under this particular project. Then we had some classroom casework replacement. That's in the 1968 and 1998 buildings. The little kids some have sinks. Casework's very old, not ADA accessible. So we looked at some replacements and upgrades in there. Window replacements in the 68 and 98 building. Interestingly enough, the 98 building is probably worse of the two, and you would think it would have been the 68 being there longer. Reason for that is there are some operable parts and pieces on those windows that aren't operable anymore and broken. And they also have some seals broken, so there's condensation forming inside the glass and that kind of thing. So we looked at that project as a replacement idea. Early childhood playground, group felt that this needed some upgrades. It's too small, needs some more equipment, newer equipment, so we took a look at that. Elementary playground, the largest piece of climbing equipment out there is in tough shape. It's got some damage. It doesn't have proper fall protection underneath of it. Fall protection is the material that you see sometimes made out of tires that is rated for how tall the fall is. Right now you don't have that under that equipment. It's also not ADA accessible. So we looked at that piece of equipment under this project. 7th and 8th grade bridge has some damage to it and some wear. We looked at that for repairs and replacement options. The auditorium had several issues that we kind of lumped together in this part of the study. The stage floor itself needs some work. The cyclorama, which is the white curtain at the very back of the stage, has got some damage to it. There's some damage to the seating and upholstery in the auditorium, so we grouped several things in the auditorium together. Those were the projects that were identified when we first came, and so those are the ones that we looked at, and they correspond to the tabs, of course, and you can feel free when you'd like to look through that and see some of the work that was done. Anybody on our committee want to offer anything else? I'm trying to stay to roughly 20 to 30 minutes here, so I don't want to go too fast and miss anything, but I don't want to keep you all night either. So if anybody's got anything else, or Mr. George, Steve, anything you want to add to any of those?
Appreciate the kind of the overview of each one of those.
Yeah, anybody else that maybe wasn't on the committee? Everybody kind of understand the scope of our work and what we went through? Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the cost, and maybe you're getting there, but the cost opinions for the stick-built option?
Yeah, I was just gonna go to 13 if we're
Okay.
done, kind of
Yep.
understanding the scope and everything. Yeah, I'll go through that now, you bet. Let me say a few things before I get into the specifics. So there's 3 paragraphs there at the beginning. This section is entitled Cost Opinion Summary, Priority Category, and Time Frame. As I said when I was describing it, those are the 3 things that we wanted you to have as sort of a summary sheet. So if you just took this page out of the book, as you're thinking about funding and timing and priorities and things, hopefully you could really use that as a guide to help you with that work. The first thing that I would say, this is a summary of the cost opinion. We call it cost opinion because we're not contractors. We want to make sure you understand these are not bids, they're not hard numbers, they are our opinion based on the information that we had. So what we've done here as far as layout is concerned, each section has a cost opinion which is much more thoroughly explained than the summary. we took the number in that section and used it as the low end column. The purpose for that was, not all these projects are gonna get done in the first year, second year, third year. There is going to be cost escalation the farther out you go. Right now, we know that things are getting costlier. So the second column, high end, we added 15% onto what was in each section's cost opinion, just to give you a bit of a range. So you know the longer that you wait to implement any of these, more than likely, the more expensive it's gonna be. Right now, inflation is 7 or 8%, and inflation on construction is more like 20 to 25%. So we felt it was important to give a pretty conservative number to that high end at this point for what we were doing. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. Low end is the number in each section. High end has a contingency factor built in. The low end numbers also have contingency. So again, we're kind of doubling, but being conservative, okay? We tried not to get too far out the range, but kind of a range there. Projects then were prioritized by the committee into 3 categories. So the categories are immediate safety and maintenance needs. We would consider that something that should be probably done in the next 1 to 3 years. That's how we categorize that. So those were safety concerns, maintenance deterioration things, anything that we felt like would have a safety or maintenance high importance factor. Next was maintenance and phase projects. Those are things that we felt they were maintenance, but they weren't immediate or imminent, and they should probably be looked at in the next 3 to 5 years. And then the final category was projects for further consideration and whether evaluated for need, and that's a beyond 5-year look. This whole document is intended to be a roughly 5 to 10 year plan for you as a district to use, assuming that these are the projects that we have, and knowing that others will come up and can be categorized, by category or shoved in there as you need to do. So this is also sort of a framework to use when other things come up or other funding sources become available that way, okay? And then the categories we talked about in each category sequentially now, as you see, those are the priorities of the committee. So if you just read straight down the list, that is the order that the committee felt after reviewing everything would be the best order to implement these projects in. Doesn't mean you will, doesn't mean you have to, just means after the body of the study was done, that's what everybody felt was appropriate. And then the timeframes in red, those are construction timeframes. So what that does is indicates to you in category 1, there are several of the first 4 or 5 projects that are a summer project, 2 to 3 months. Then the next ones, maybe 6 to 9, 3 to 4. Now we're starting to talk about projects that may impact students as they may be here when things are getting done, that kind of thing. So we kind of wanted you to know about how long we thought it would take. The last thing to take away from this document are the 3 stars, the 3 red stars. The district currently explained to us that there's already funding available for some of these projects and possibly earmarked for these projects as they've been talked about before. So we starred the ones that we thought had already been discussed. There's already a budget or a figure attached to some of them. That does not mean that the figures in the range match the budget that you have, but it does mean that those were prioritized high, they were funding already available, and then you can decide how you may want to continue with that. So does that all make sense to everybody? I hope it's sort of a framework for understanding how we put the whole thing together, and a tear out that you can sit with and just talk about, how you're gonna assign projects and money and time and all that kind of thing. Okay? To the group that we work with, does that cover pretty well what we talked about? Okay,
Wouldn't, probably the track would also be kind of something that that's part of the Pearl, but with the others.
Yeah, so the auditorium and the playground and the track, that's where Pearl dollars, we could really look at using that. Right now, we've got a balance of about $100,000 in there,
So it doesn't cover.
It doesn't go
Doesn't-
very far.
cover all those projects, right? We're generating about between $40,000 and $45,000 annually in Pearl. It's a 13-cent levy each year. In addition, our preschool categorical funding, we've got about $100,000 in reserve there. So when we're looking specifically at the early childhood playground, there's about another $100,000 that we could look at for that. Otherwise, if it doesn't have an asterisk, we're talking our PEPAL and our SAVE dollars. Knowing that we're generating each year about $1 million, but half of that we've allocated to paying off our SAVE debt that we took out in 2014, so about $225,000 there. We've allocated money for buses and vehicles, and then technology is the kind of the other big ticket item each year. So about $500,000 each year from PEPAL and SAVE combined leaves us about $500,000 each year where we can either do some projects or save over a couple-year time frame, do some projects. I don't want to get into the weeds, but Jackie and I also sat down and had conversations with Piper Jaffray about what we can start planning for, and if we want to consider some additional funding streams. So I'm thinking in April, that's another report that Jackie and I can kind of bring back to the group, kind of give you the capacity, whether it's the 1 to 3 year time frame or through that kind of intermediate phased section of the projects.
I'll piggyback a couple comments onto this too, because as I said, it was high-level design work. This is a good example of that. One of those earmarked projects was the playgrounds, actually 2 of them. The biggest element of each one of those is the play structure. The play structure can be $25,000 or $100,000, okay? Depending on what you pick. We put an allowance in of something for that. So it is possible that this number will get you that playground, or it's over 2 summers that you buy one piece of equipment and then you add another one, or you get a grant for a piece of equipment or that kind of thing. So that's what I was talking about, there's just so many options that we can't explore them all. We're just really looking at prioritizing with some of these numbers. Some of the other ones are easy, like a new gym, I can tell you what one cost when we just did it a year ago. But some of these have some elements that are really big swing. And so I hope you don't get too fixed on this, other than size and scope of a project, to say, there really is a way that we could still do this. We just haven't designed it, we don't know all the parameters. Playgrounds, we haven't had the teachers involved. We haven't talked to anybody other than the group about what's needed. Okay? I'm happy to talk about any of these, and so we can take your question and I can talk about that.
Sure.
That was an interesting discussion. That was sort of a light bulb moment, I think, last time we met. Drive by the tennis court, there's a house sitting there. That's about the right size for a maintenance building. You guys could maybe work that into your curriculum for that particular class and end up building that yourself. Hire a contractor to do the foundation, set that in place. That's way better option. If it would work, however, might take 1.5 years, depending on how long they can take to do it. So there are also some options like that. That is why we did not put an option on that, because the idea behind that is you have maybe a curriculum outlet for that and really could save a lot of cost and teach a lesson and get that done. Now remember, if you do that, you're still gonna need an architect or an engineer to say, this meets code, this meets the proper construction techniques. But in that case, if it was us, we could work with your instructor, that kind of thing. So I think there's also some curriculum opportunities in here too, if you looked at it that way.
Like when it comes to the new bus barn, which is a higher ticket item, is it a longevity issue with stick-built that you see that you just don't consider that for that type of building?
Yeah, I think if you go look at it now, you would understand that pretty well. That is a tin on wood
Yep.
structure. It's pretty rough, doesn't have a floor.
Yep.
You know, it's all, a lot of it's maintenance too. I don't mind saying this again, because when we went on our walk, you guys have one of the best looking facilities that I've seen. And I complimented both your admin and your operations people on that. It's fantastic. That makes a huge difference. If you have someone that's watching over maintenance and keeps that up, you can easily get double the longevity out of some of these things. I think that was long gone before, you know. But, so you definitely could do a stick-built in that case. You know, what's the lifetime? 10 to 15 years. If a bus runs into a corner, you know, it's gone. So we did some options in here that you'll see also. We have a pre-engineered metal building for that. That's an upgrade of a stick building with metal structure and kind of a kit that comes from like a Butler or somebody like that. So that's in here. Stick built, we really didn't explore that, but that would be another option that is less. And then we went with masonry. Masonry might be there 75 years. You know, the pre-engineered might be 40, 30, something like that. Stick built 10 to 15, depending. The other thing to remember is, since you're a school, there are building code requirements that make it different than a farm type building or a, you know, another building like that. So I'm sure that some of these numbers surprise and shock you, and I won't even say they're absolutely correct, but I hope they're in the range of what we would consider a commercial level building for a school district. That was kind of the thought process. You definitely can do these cheaper, different ways. There's lots of ways and lots of ways that we could look at it. But we had to figure out something, you know, so that's our baseline.
Sure, yeah, I'm certainly not advocating for that, I just wanted
Yeah,
your thoughts on
It's
that.
a good question.
so.
I just, you know, a lot of people will say, wow, why are you doing it that way? Well, you know, we have to start somewhere and end somewhere. We assume that the district wants something that's maintainable and doesn't have to have a lot of money spent on it every year and is gonna last for a while. So that's kind of the baseline.
Speaking of the bus barn, did you have any conversation about location?
We did talk a little bit about location, we just felt that at the end of the day, where it's at right now is probably the best place going forward. While it is a little inconvenient for our bus drivers, it also is nice to have it where it's at because of somewhere closer to on campus, whether it's down towards the activity center or we're putting something here. Now we're in the middle of a neighborhood where it's at currently is more of, it's been there since
Yeah.
78 or 79. So,
Gives us
Um,
one more option for getting in and out, more than we could do here too. I think that was.
Yeah, that particular location was nice because it's accessible on two sides, it's on a corner, you own the property, it's rather large. So we didn't go much outside of that, but we did talk about it.
Steve, anything about any of these projects or any feedback for the board?
I would also add, the other thing I'd piggyback on is, many of these projects can be phased. So for example, the classroom casework one, you might choose to do 5 classrooms for 5 years, or 10 for 2 years, you know, whatever it ends up to be. That can, you know, expand and kind of use the money that you have at the time. It's not something that has to go more than a summer, you know, so there's some options like that too. I think the biggest thing to remember right now is the biggest bang for your buck would be tagging things together and doing them as soon as you can, right now. That won't always be the case, and it hasn't always been the case. Right now, you know, I cannot tell you even in the next 2 years it's gonna be better than this. It's still getting worse right now, as far as cost. There hasn't been any real improvement on the lead time and supply chain issues. with shipping and transportation and stuff. We just found out that structural steel is going up another 6-7% in a month. Wood is going back up. I haven't delved into why. I really don't even want to know why. But, it's just a very, very strange time to be doing projects. So even though it seems counterintuitive, I still think it's better to move forward with something than not do anything. Because I cannot tell you it's gonna get any better in the next 12 to 24 months at this point.
I did visit with our industrial tech on the maintenance shed. So we're gonna do a little exploring there and get some prices and see if he can help me
Yeah, I mean, that would be,
build something.
I think that's a great opportunity. It's not that complicated of a project, I think it could be a win.
Is your preference to have it attached or the detached?
Well,
I don't think attached is an option.
attached isn't an option because of all the fire codes and stuff.
Oh, sure.
So the issue with that is, since it is a different building occupancy classification means what's going on in there is different than the building you're attaching it to. We have to separate those buildings with fire code, and it's a pretty expensive firewall that we have to put there.
Yeah, I saw the option in
So,
here.
yeah, right now it's not complying,
Yep.
but it was built so long ago, it wouldn't have mattered. But if you do something new, then you've gotta
Yeah.
follow the new code. We tried to put that kind of thing in there, so if you are reading through, you'll kinda understand the context of those. A lot of it's building code issues, ADA issues. The fact of the matter is, we all need more space than we did before, now, so it's bigger than what's there. All of that's sort of alluded to in most of this, so. I think as far as, moving forward, Mr. Jorth, I think that we would leave this with you, let you digest it, talk about it a little bit more. We have informally talked about, there's really almost no possibility of getting any of this stuff done this summer because of lead time and, I'm coming up to the point now where I can't get contractors to bid on things because they're just busy, they're booked. So I think it would be unlikely, although we may have some success with the playgrounds if you wanted to explore it, doing some of that. But the rest of them, I think we're talking about next summer. What that really means is, depending on the project, you probably need to know by the time school starts what you're gonna do for the next summer, because there'll be design time, we have to go through the state for approvals and that kind of thing to get something ready to bid. Just as a little primer, your size community, I believe the threshold for bidding is $57,000. You don't have to bid, you can do just a individual proposal from a contractor. Under $133,000 or $139,000, 2 proposals is all that's required. You're still gonna need some design documents and approvals and that kind of thing, but you don't have to do the full bidding process. Over $130-some thousand is full bidding. All that means is it just takes longer and we need more documentation and that kind of thing. So many of these projects we could maybe look at. You are not allowed to split the project down to get underneath those particular thresholds, but we could help you, figure out how to phase them or something like that, or whoever does it could do that. So I'm happy to take any more questions, or if the group can think of anything else that we didn't cover, or the rest of you that really are just seeing it for the first time, if you have other questions, we're happy to field them.
I had a question on the auditorium stage floor. Is that more of a local contractor? I'm not positive I understand what the floor is gonna look like. I know it's more like
Yeah.
plywood. It's not plywood, but.
Right? Yeah, I think
Or is
that's,
that more of a staging?
no, I don't think that's necessary. I think a general contractor, I would say a little higher than a handyman, but a general contractor that's a smaller one that might be in the community could do that. It's not a hard process, but since it's a auditorium floor, There's some acoustic issues and some construction issues that we want to make clear with them. So the group knows that particular floor that you have now is wood plank flooring. If you go to any other facilities that have been upgraded, you may find that they have replaced that with painted plywood. The reason for that is because a lot of the larger set pieces that get moved around scrape and drag across that, and a lot of them need to be secured, so you can screw them into the plywood, and it's easy to patch and touch up paint, and it still looks decent. If you look at your stage floor now, it's like a gym floor, only it's got a lot of elevation changes, it's got chipped out pieces and that kind of thing, and that's just from wear, because you got a lot of foot traffic and stuff on it. The other thing there is, that is usually put on what we call sleepers, and then it has the construction of the stage underneath. We put sand inside there because we don't want that drumming sound underneath the stage that you would get without it. So there's some specific things about that, but you're exactly right. It would be basically a painted plywood floor that you could, move around on, patch, maintain easier, that kind of thing. And that is what we priced, just for people's understanding. Answer your
I
question?
had one more question.
Yeah.
Maintenance shed behind in the activity center in the same area. As long as we're 5 feet away from the building?
I think it's more than 5 feet. I can't remember what that is by code.
I think it's 15 or 20.
Yeah, I think it's more like, and it depends on the type of construction that you're using and the type that you're going to. There's we can figure it out based on what we're gonna do, but it'd be more than 5 feet. Which in that case, because it's there, would limit the size, because you can only go so far and then you're in the alley, that kind of thing. Think we've covered.
Yeah, thanks for the study and facilitating the conversation with our Buildings and Grounds Committee. This was really helpful overview, but like you said, I think for us, it's, a conversation we're gonna need to continue to have kind of through the report section. I think maybe the next phase is Jackie and I coming back to you saying, okay, here's maybe some of the dollars and the thresholds that we feel like are available to us, and then we can maybe re-engage with Matt and Scott to figure out exactly where we go from here.
And we would be happy to come back and do, say, a work session or something, if you're having trouble. You can ask us what seems good to group together, how would you see it going together, that kind of thing. Happy to do it.
Thanks for making the trip.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
There we go. Okay. Okay, we will move on to item H, old business. And the item we have there is considered the second reading of the new policies listed that were the first reading last month.
Yep, so again, I have that in the memo, it's page 35 of the packet. 302.3, 302.5, 302.6.
Any more questions on those carry over from last month? Not, I'd entertain a motion when you're ready.
Make a motion to approve those policies as listed, second reading.
Second.
A motion and second to approve the second reading of the new policies as listed. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to new business. First item there, number 1, consider business and enterprise service contract with Premier Communications for 22-23, 23-24, 24-25.
So, again, memos coming from Curtis in regards to basically our internet service from Premier. 3-year contract. As the memo says, we're able to E-rate this. And so the discounts are approximately $600, 60%, so we're paying 40%. Again, Premier provides not only us, but kind of our surrounding communities and their school districts, their internet. Again, they'll continue to provide on-site support as we need it. Anything I missed, Jackie?
Nope, current customer, good service, good relationship. When we have to do bid proposals through the C-rate program, they score the highest in every category, so.
We have a separate consulting arrangement with them, right?
Yes.
That's a separate contract.
So last year, this time, we had the consulting, kind of the service agreement.
Mhm.
Which is also E-rated, but just a different service.
This is just for our internet.
This is just wireless internet connectivity, yep.
There's no questions on that? Entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve that.
Second?
A motion and second to approve the service contract with Premier Communications for the next 3 years. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Before we go to the next one, next month, I plan to have Curtis and Jeff kind of come and just give everybody an overview of kind of the tech department and not only these annual agreements, but also some of the infrastructure, which is also another big part of our PEPAL and SAVE, knowing that our wireless infrastructure is at a decade, so we're gonna need to upgrade that because that technology has changed significantly. They've done a great job of making sure that we've kept up with the times, but at this point, we're looking at a pretty significant project that we're gonna need to invest in that too.
Which is also category E-rate discounted, so we've submitted all those bids as well.
Good. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2 of new business. Consider purchasing agreement with Area Education Association / AEA for food and food service supplies for next year.
Yeah, so again, this purchasing agreement is like purchasing through a consortium. Page 32 specifically says this year 323 Iowa school districts participated in this, so we're one of those. There's, give you an idea, there's 341 school districts across the state. We're not necessarily limited or pigeonholed to getting any of these supplies, it's another option for us. So if we wanna use somebody locally, or we can get a match from somebody in Sheldon, you know, we'll probably use that local vendor, but this maybe just gives us access to a wider pool of vendors.
Annual agreement.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second to approve purchasing agreement with AEA for next year. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3, policy reviews. I think we'll take A and B first.
Yep.
Then we'll move on to C.
Yes, so A and B, again, if kind of the 302 series was the superintendent policies, the 303 really is administrators, so our principals. And so the list of those 10 policies there, minor language changes, that's why that's really just a review. And then the rescinding of 303.6 is because the new leadership standards that are the same for me, are the same for the principals, are now in the policy for 303.6, where previously the leadership standards, the board at some point in the past had adopted those outside of the actual 303.6. So both those, like you said, we're just reviewing the first 9, rescinding 303.6A.
questions on those?
So with those, since they're existing policies, did we decide we didn't need to worry about a first or second reading?
So we should be able to approve the review of the policies listed in A and then rescind B all with one motion. And not have to bring it back next.
Right. Without needing to specify and waiving a second reading after we maybe have done with that.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Then I'll make a motion to approve the policies in A and rescind the policy in section B.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second to approve the review of the policies listed along with rescinding policy 303.6A. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to the first reading of the new policies listed.
Yep, so we've always had 303.6. Like I said, since we're adopting the new leadership standards, that's why I'm recommending we have the first reading tonight. April, bring it back for the second reading. Otherwise, got them a little out of order here, but 303.7, 0.8, and 0.9 are all new policies. We just haven't had those in the past. Again, recommendations from ISB to have these very similar to the same superintendent policies, but again, applying to principals as administrators.
Now, when we're defining administrators, we're referring to the principals. correct?
Yes, and if we were to have an activities director in the future that has an evaluator's endorsement of part of their license, then they would be an administrator as well. We're not talking about Jackie or Darsha or kind of what I refer to as our leaders. We're talking about a certified, administrator that has a license to evaluate other staff members
And you fall under the separate policies.
as a
correct?
superintendent.
Yep.
Because my license allows me to evaluate administrators. Principal's license allows them to evaluate teachers. So that's the difference between the two different groups.
Any questions on those? Otherwise, we can have some more dialogue about it next month during the second reading.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve the first reading of the new policies as listed. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Item 4, personnel. We have 2 resignations and 1 hiring listed. We'll take those separately. Mr. George, first one with
Yeah, Mrs. Deitch's resignation is included on page 37 of the packet. She's accepted a position in another district for next year. We thank her for her 14 years of service to students and families in the instrumental music department, and wish her the best in her new endeavor.
questions or discussion on that?
I'll make a motion to approve the resignation of Amanda Deitch.
Second. A motion and a second to approve the resignation of Emily Deitch. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Number 2, Desiree Cobbs.
Yep, Coach Kopp's resignations included. She met with Mr. Engelman and Mr. Cruz, and Coach Shar after the season. And her resignation is included here because of the conflict between her current employment and kind of the timing of practices in the fall. Before school starts, Des is working as kind of the assistant city clerk. Practices for volleyball before school starts is kind of during the school day, so it's difficult for her to get to those commitments during kind of that preseason week to 10 days before the season starts.
So
And those time, sorry, go ahead.
is that schedule different than when she first was assistant coach? The practice schedule,
Nope,
has that changed?
It's been the same, so in the past, she's made some practices, but she hasn't made them all. And just the flexibility of that, maybe between her employer and us here at the school, and when Coach Shar wants those practices to be, just unfortunately hasn't worked out.
Is there a reason they can't negotiate a time, or that works well for both of them, or all of them?
Yeah, I think, in talking to, all those parties that have met, I think it's just, that's the time that Coach Shar, would like to practice and continue to practice. And I think they've had those conversations, and that's where the resignation is coming in.
So you're saying there was no changes to the schedule of times? Her resignation letter implies there are changes. That's where to me, that seems like there's a disconnect there. I'm not,
Yeah, the early morning practice times, kind of into the morning practice time has been the habit of the high school volleyball program since I've been here for 3 years. So to my knowledge, the times aren't changing. It's the same as it's always has been going forward for this next year.
When does that practice schedule typically start then? Are these like the 2 weeks leading up to school, or
Yep.
is it more than just those practices?
That's the kind of when they're sanctioned to get started. There are some
Right.
summer workouts, that's not necessarily the reasoning, the rationale here. That summer workout is, I think, 2 or 3 days for girls in the summer, and they kind of share that same time with the girls' basketball program. So like 1 or 2 days a week is basketball, and then the following week, volleyball gets the 2 days. So it's on a rotation, so it's not always one sport or the other.
I guess I'd like a little more info about like what has changed. I mean, obviously she's saying due to the changes in this schedule and these changes being non-negotiable, she feels like she's being asked to resign. I don't think that it's an issue with her employer. I mean, I know she has an outside employment other than the school, but she had that when she started as well, and I think they were flexible with that. I don't think the issue is with her current employer.
One of the options we have is, we did see this for the first time on Wednesday, and we were followed up with state basketball Thursday and Friday, and I think some are on the table, we're probably already in Des Moines on Wednesday evening, so our AD isn't here either. So maybe one option is to table it for tonight and flip it back to the personnel committee to maybe speak with the AD, get some additional information for that, but we also have the option to accept it as well. So just throwing out options there.
Were you a part of those conversations with?
I don't evaluate the coaches at the end of the season.
I'd be
Dan
in
and Jake.
favor of waiting then as well to get more information from the.
Tabling assessment for now.
Activity director.
Get a lot more information, understand.
And was it an in-person conversation with the coaches themselves, or they had a conversation together?
To my knowledge, yeah, they've had conversations about kind of the expectations for practice and
Because I don't know, I mean, I've heard that it was only an email, and so I guess I would like to know a little bit more about why there is that disconnect and just get a little bit more background on it.
so the personnel committee, I can set up a meeting with Dan and Jason, who participated in that.
Yeah.
And then, if you guys got questions, I would
Yep.
either pass them along to me, or Dave, or Andy, so you can feel like we're getting everybody's questions answered.
Yeah. Well, I think the questions from Mr. Dorth are fine, or it goes to him, and conclude this if you want, but, yeah.
So we need a motion to
Yeah,
table.
Amy, do you wanna make that?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to table that until
I'll
the
second.
school committee, yep.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to place Des Kopp's resignation on the table for action at a later date. All in favor, say aye.
Okay.
All opposed? Motion carried. Hiring of Ms. Fitch, Mr. Dorr.
Yeah, so this recommendation is coming from Mr. Engelman. A couple weeks ago now, he interviewed Ms. Fitch. She is currently teaching at Sibley O'Sheaton, but she would be, this position is because Rebecca Hakeman's submitted her resignation, so we're talking on level 2 classroom at the high school level, 9 through 12. So students that are maybe on an alternative assessment, that have more significant disabilities intellectually or physically.
Does she have her level 2 certification?
She does, yep. So this is a very difficult position to fill, so feel very fortunate to find not only somebody certified, but somebody that's got some experience.
Do you know how much experience she has?
So she's in year 3 currently, so she'll come to us already through the mentoring and induction program. So she'll,
Similar, maybe a year or 2 less experience than Rebecca, but Rebecca came to us with maybe a year of experience, something like that.
yeah, I think
I
she's,
just don't think any.
Maybe
Yeah.
not any.
yeah, I think she was an initial teacher with us, and this is year 6
Okay,
at Central Line.
Mhm.
So,
that sounds right.
Is she doing any coaching over there?
she's been involved with softball and volleyball.
Okay.
Excited because she's interested in doing some of those things here too. So,
Okay.
as those opportunities present themselves.
Entertain a motion for that hiring when you're ready.
Motion to approve the hiring of Bailey Fitch as special education teacher.
I'll second.
A motion and second to hire Ms. Bailey Fitch as high school special education teacher. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Announcements, dates to remember.
The only one that I need to have is Monday, the 11th. Can't stray from that date once I publish the budget, so I wanna make sure that works for everyone before we get too far in. Once we hold that publication, that'll be our hearing at 6:55 to accept comments from the public, and we'll approve the budget that night. Or
By the 15th.
review the budget that night for consideration for approval, and I have to have it certified by the 15th. And the only reason is the dates make a big difference is because I have to have a publication in the paper 10 to 20 days in advance of the hearing. Not more than 20, not less than 10. So, if that works for everyone, we'll stick with Monday the 11th.
It's always Jack, the central line relay, so I'm might be here, might not.
As long as we have a quorum, that is perfectly
If I need to
fine.
be here, then
Very good,
I will make a point, but otherwise it'll probably depend on my girls are running.
understandable.
Everybody else good?
And then it'll just be 5 minutes earlier that night, so. I'll remind you at a later date. Thank you.
Otherwise, like it's listed there, parent-teacher conferences will conclude Thursday, no school this Friday. And then we are scheduled for the ISASP testing that kind of last week in March, first week in April. And then we've added the work study, the work session on the 7th with ISB on innovation and creative educational programs.
Okay. I think we're complete.
I'll make-
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Did the April 7 meeting, did you schedule a time?
5:30.
Then we just have some more fun, and that's with the list of bills, so. It is always fun.
So just to be clear, like this is like a design firm, but they like line up the contractors, is that?
So what,
I didn't know for
if we,
sure what their.
yep,